Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Munch&Learn with No Limits. I'm delighted to have with me this morning Richard Collins. Richard is the founder of CSR accreditation. I think you've been doing that for about seven years. He's a sustainability consultant, international keynote speaker on sustainability, and I believe now senior advisor to the ESG as well. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, to the All Parties Parliamentary Group for ESG.
Okay, fantastic. Well, an absolute delight to have you here this morning, talking on the subject of CSR. Obviously from your expertise, but really today I really want to focus on helping SME business owners and their teams benefit from CSR, if that's the right way of putting it. And I guess before we kick off, it is a diverse subject. How would you really define CSR in a relevant way to small business owners?
Well, first of all, James, thank you for inviting me onto this chat this morning. I'm very grateful. What we wanted to do those many years ago was create a framework that was relevant for SMEs. And part of that was redefining the C. So we kind of called it a C change, if you like. And the idea being that the C can't only stand for corporate social responsibility. It has to be able to stand for company social responsibility or community social responsibility or charitable social responsibility. And more relevant and best of all, perhaps, is collective or collaborative social responsibility. So the idea that if we're going to make a difference, we have to work in collaboration with each other to make that difference. So the first thing was understanding that we were redefining CSR for a new age. Secondly, we wanted to introduce a very simple framework, because what we've seen in recent years is the sustainability landscape becoming very complicated, with a lot of acronyms and jargon and terminology, and it gets confusing and a little bit overwhelming. And we've started to be aware that it kind of puts people off, and yet there is an appetite to do the right thing. So the framework are 4 pillars of environment, workplace, community, and philanthropy. And the simplicity of that framework is really in asking an organization, what are you already doing? And we haven't come across an example when an organization isn't doing anything. In fact, in almost all cases, organizations, SMEs, are delivering some level of sustainability against each of those 4 pillars.
Excellent. I love the fact that you're redefining the C. And I know when we spoke the other day, you said that actually SMEs were a big part of the change, and what drove you personally to set this up. Just as an aside, what made the change for you personally, Richard, to go away and set this up from your previous life?
Well, it's not a massive step. I mean, my previous life, and arguably it's still part of my current life, was branding. And we always used to say when we did deliver talks on branding, is your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And the reason I love that is because it's still true, except the topic has changed. And I think back 15, 20 years ago, perhaps people talked about the quality of your products and your services and how great you were at delivering and all of these things. Whereas I think you should take that as granted, that when you buy a product from a company, that it's going to be good. They're not deliberately selling you shoddy products. But the important thing is that they're acting responsibly to their people and to the environment. And I think that branding, that marketing language has changed, and businesses are now judged on how they behave responsibly, and how they build that sustainability up in their own organization. And I think the reason I got excited about the SME market, because that was predominantly the area we worked, was that SMEs by definition are smaller, and therefore they're much more hands-on, they're much more dynamic, and they have a greater ability to deliver meaningful impact against those 4 pillars than corporates, because obviously you have your board of directors and you sometimes have departmental issues and there's a lot more red tape. And we find from our assessors, so we have a global environmental and social responsibility accreditation. Right. And and it's designed to be accessible. So the idea of the accreditation is to baseline. So what are we doing against those 4 pillars already? And we provide a list to prompt thinking. So it could be things like LED lights, or having a waste management strategy, recycling. It could be something around mental health and well-being, or diversity in the workplace, apprenticeships. And it could be how we support communities and how we work with charities. It doesn't need to be a great deal. It needs to show that we're on a sustainability journey. So the baseline is deliberately quite low, because we want to encourage people to look at what they're doing. And then what we try and do is show where the gaps are, and inform and educate around the things that we should be looking at and should be doing. And then as we help that company towards a re-accreditation in years to come, we take the bar higher. And introduce those different things that organizations can start to look at and introduce into their business practices. And our assessors, going back to what I was trying to say earlier, our assessors have told us, and we have an independent assessment panel, they've said that by and large, smaller businesses deliver more social responsibility per head than bigger organizations.
Yeah. I guess from what you said there, it sounds like you're trying to make it almost really easy, simple, almost a no-brainer decision, not necessarily to do some form of accreditation. I know you represent that, but for everyone to take some steps to improve the world for the planet and the people, is the way I often simply sum it up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we recognize that there are lots of drivers for this, and businesses, as I said earlier, all have an appetite to do the right thing. And it might be because they morally and ethically think it's the right thing to do, or it might be because there are, commercial benefits to doing it, and there are both. So, we talk about that return on social impact and that social return on impact. So we do show that environmental and social responsibility is a profit center, is good for the bottom line. And therefore, and why is that? Well, it's because it's how we build a purpose-driven culture that attracts and retains staff, that delivers better productivity, that improves your brand reputation, that helps you win tenders, helps you access funding, and helps you, build a sustainable business going forward. So all of that's very good. But then the impact side is actually the difference we make, how we make a positive impact on the environment, how we, look after our people and include them in our decision making, and how we work together collaboratively up and down our supply chains and within our, through our customers and our staff to do little things that often add up to big impacts. So you're right. We don't make it simple. We need a level of rigor. So the premise is you're doing stuff. So we help you audit that. So there is a question of sitting down, looking at what we're doing. We don't want it to be prescriptive. We don't want to tell you what you should be doing. We're asking you what you are doing. And then what we do when we know what that baseline looks like, we now can help you measure the impact you're making. So now we can say, a good one is people talk about carbon reduction and decarbonisation, part of the net zero strategy, without necessarily having their carbon footprint data. So that's fine. So at the beginning, we say, right, okay, maybe there's a gap there. It's brilliant that you've got these decarbonisation strategies within your business. And yes, you are reducing your carbon footprint, but you need to know what your carbon footprint is. So you can measure the impact you're making. So maybe, the thing that we would then encourage that business to do going forward is address that issue. And then when they come for reaccreditation, they can say, right, what we've done is we now know what our carbon footprint is. We now know that the strategy we have to decarbonize is resulting in a reduction in our carbon footprint. And we're able to show what that is by putting the KPIs or the metrics in to measure that. So it's things like that. And the other thing is, with that degree of light rigor, because this for us is carrot territory, not stick territory. We do want to encourage people to do something rather than nothing. And we want to show that they are doing something, and that is brilliant. And we really want them to do more, So the idea being that gap analysis, that kind of, idea is to look at what you're doing and encourage that organization to back it up with evidence to support it where that evidence exists. And we know it doesn't always exist. If you're a small sole trader working from a home office and you say you are recycling, we'll take that, on trust that you are doing that, and maybe you might support that with some evidence. Whereas if you're a bigger organization, you might have with your waste contractor independent documentation to show the reduction in waste to landfill, and the fact that you are reusing or recycling or using less paper, for example. So the important things about evidencing is we need to make sure that we're not greenwashing or box ticking. So, and that's where the impact is important, because the real value in this is the impact we're making. But the great thing about the world I inhabit is seeing the amazing things that people do, the innovative things that people do. Our lists are there to guide. They're not there to make people feel bad that they're not doing everything. Because, as you said earlier, social responsibility, environmental and social responsibility is huge. It covers everything, from travel to waste to energy, to community engagement, to local economic development, to staff, to creating staff wealth and happiness. It's a big topic. And there are things that companies are doing that we have no idea about that are genuinely brilliant. And so we learn about these great things. And that's because there's no one size fits all solution. The reason being is that all our companies are different. All our industry sectors are different.
Absolutely. I mean, you've reminded us of how huge the area is. And I guess I'm a massive advocate of CSR and all the work you do, Richard. So some of these questions are, deliberately provocative to just get the right answer for some of the small business owners out there. But as there's so much, how does somebody start to prioritize what's important to do first? Because I guess there are certain stuff that is, on trend. For example, you mentioned carbon. There's a lot in the press about that at the moment. Certain things might become legislation down the line. What advice would you give to a small business trying to decide what they do first, because it's going to be most important to them operating their business?
Well, first of all,
the question in quite a selfish way for the business owner.
But first of all, this isn't a race, it's a journey, and it takes time to do these things. It might take a year or 2 years or 3 years to put strategies in place, or to address the strategies you already have and build them into part of your business practice. So we're not like looking for knee-jerk reactions. The second thing is, we don't want companies to do 100 things badly, or we want companies to pick 10 things that they can do really, really well, that are relevant and material to their business. So when we get to the idea of materiality and what's relevant to my business, it's going to be different for different organizations. And some of those drivers, as I said earlier, may be because there's pressure. So if we take the decarbonisation and the net zero side of things, that starts to tap into your scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting. So scope 1 and 2 is the control you have within your organization. That's your energy use and waste and so on and so forth. Whereas scope 3 is your upstream and downstream supply chain, who might be knocking on your door and saying, we need you to report on the carbon being used in the services or products that we're supplying you, or you're supplying us. Because we need to put that into a report. So there may be, okay, we don't have a strategy for that, so we now need to find a way of doing it. And also, as I said earlier, about recruitment, a new generation of talent that is, really, really scrutinizing an organization's website before accepting a job or applying for a job based on that organization's environmental and social responsibilities. So there's a cost to that. There's a cost of,
Absolutely,
not recruiting. So making sure we get the right people into our business. And, we've got the data from some lovely work that LinkedIn has recently done this year that suggests that that generation of talent is looking for a purpose-driven culture above and beyond paycheck. Not saying that money isn't important, it is, but we're seeing people saying, well, we want to find somewhere to work that, matches our sense of value and our expectations for the world going forward as well. So I think the thing is that organizations, need to look at what's right for them, material for them. So there are some pressures. It might be that, it's an accountancy firm and they're struggling with retention and engagement. So that's what they'll focus on. It might be a manufacturing firm who's got supply chain knocking on the door saying, you need to help us by reporting on your scope 3 emissions. It might be around apprenticeships. It might be around diversity and inclusion issues within the organization. So there's lots of different things it may be. And so each organization will have a rough idea of where they need to start. And also, James, I think the other thing to remember is that natural ability to want to do the right thing. Owners of organizations, thinking we need to be better. And part of that is driven from a generational lens. So our children saying, Mum and Dad, what are you doing to build a better legacy for my generation and the generations that come after? So, how can we work together to reduce our negative impacts and build a culture that is purpose driven within the organizations that we work and the communities that we work as well? Because we don't want to extract business from society. It's part of society. And therefore we need to encourage businesses to look after local communities, support local communities, and also importantly, to work with and support local charities.
Just a quick one on the scope 1, 2, 3 reporting. That only kicks in at a certain size of business currently, is that right?
No, not at all. No, I mean, your scope 3 reporting. So there's a difference between mandatory and voluntary. So this isn't necessarily a mandatory thing. It's a request that you might get from within the supply chain. So what we have coming in next year is the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That's an EU initiative, and that's for businesses of over 250 staff or more. And that's likely to trickle down to smaller businesses, and it's likely to come across from the EU into the UK, and there will be a legal mandatory requirement to report on it. Currently, we have the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate Change Non-Financial Disclosure, which is for businesses of over 500 or turning over 500 million, I think. To check that statistic, it's roughly right. And that is mandatory because the UK signed up to the TCFD, as did a number of other countries. But in terms of scope 3, you could be a small engineering company of 15, who's providing components to a larger organization, and that larger organization has over 250 staff. They have to report. They need to look at their scope 3 reporting. So they're knocking on your door and saying, what's the carbon footprint of you delivering the products that we're buying off you? Because we need to put that into our report. So if that company wants to stay in the supply chain, then they're going to have to, look at that reporting. What we have with the government and the NHS is the carbon reduction plan, for example. So to be part of the procurement strategy for the NHS, you need to be able to fill in a carbon reduction plan. So it's not legal. It's not a mandatory.
It's a vital part of
if you don't do it, you can't be on their roster.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, I don't know if this already exists, but there could be some form of kind of opportunities risk assessment for your own business based on the things that are going to have the most economic impact or opportunity, that link to doing good, essentially.
Well, you've used two good words there. So you've used risk and opportunity. Environmental and social responsibility is a lot about mitigating risk and looking at opportunities. So as we go through transition, there's a huge range of opportunities. So, again, as a manufacturing company or a product-driven company, you could be looking at using recycled packaging. You could be looking at innovating in the way you provide your products. You could be actually using the USP of the environmental credentials of your products as a way of being competitive in a market. So there are opportunities, but there is about mitigating risks. So what are the risks? Well, the risks, as I've said, is poor retention, is not attracting talent, is not winning tenders. So we know that in the public sector, environmental and social responsibility can be weighted as much as 30 points in your tendering. So 1 point can make all the difference. And if you lose that, £250,000 tender, then that's detrimental to your business. And then with the ESG agenda, so ESG being environment, social and governance, and I think it's important to make a definition that ESG are the tools that the global investment markets use to measure risk and opportunity when investing in businesses. And that could be through acquisition, or it could be through mergers, or whatever it might be. But they are the tools that measure environmental and social responsibility. So you have to have a framework in place in order for those tools to measure that framework, and then for the independent ratings agency to give you a rating that will then be used by the financial markets to make a decision on whether they're going to invest in your organization or not. So therefore, and where ESG is aligned, that works perfectly well. So, you know, ESG is about, you know, finance, about money, about profit. And therefore, you know, you're seeing a huge growth of investment in green technology, green innovation, around clean energy, clean fuel, clean power, and so on and so forth. So there is a symbiotic relationship between CSR, which is about people, about culture, about organizations. It's it's sort of almost a philosophical approach, and ESG, which is about your investment market, your board of directors, your shareholders, and mitigating the risk, because an investor doesn't want to invest in a business that down the line is going to have an issue with toxic bullying in the workplace, or, you know, polluting a local river, or whatever it might be. It needs to make sure that it's putting those procedures and that transition into place, to show that it is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and as we know, we work with quite a few businesses that are business owners that are selling their business on. One of the things that impacts them is the future growth or profit growth within their business as a forecast for that effectively the buyer is shelling out for. So unless they have addressed some of the key issues / opportunities, I like to emphasize the opportunities for their particular market, they're simply not going to be worth as much in the long term.
Absolutely. And it's about putting that planning in place, because, you know, you may not have these things in place now, and that's fine. You know, no one's expecting a magic wand to wave and then suddenly all this stuff happens. As I said, this is a journey. So if you're putting into your business planning, your future planning, you're saying, right, okay, we don't do this at the moment, but we are going to introduce, you know, a strategy that addresses waste management, or a strategy that looks at the banning of single-use plastics, or a strategy that looks at how we reduce our travel, our international travel, et cetera, and how we put the metrics in to measure the impact we're making. That's fine, because you're putting in, you know, when we talk about companies that apply to be accredited, we're not just looking at what they're currently doing, we're looking at their future advisories. And if a company in their application says, we don't do this now, but next year we're going to put together a team that's going to provide pro bono work for charities, well, that's a statement of intent, and we want to hold you accountable for that. So you know, that's important. It's a strategy that's in place that can be delivered later down the line. So, and as I say, we're not looking at doing 100 things. You know, it sounds like this is overwhelming, and it's not. It's actually very simple. So the four pillar framework is a great starting point. And from that 4-pillar framework, what we've done is we've mapped that to the ESG components. We've mapped it to the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We're mapping it to the International Sustainability Standards as well. And you can use those 4 pillars to navigate a sustainable journey, irrespective of whether you become accredited or not. It's the framework that helps you navigate a journey in the right direction that's relevant and material for your organization.
So look, I'm an SME owner. I've got some positive intent about this, but I haven't really done anything. I've got other priorities going on in the business, so I can't devote too much time and energy to CSR. How do I simply get started? Because you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned those four pillars. I believe you got some tools as well that people can use.
Yeah, we've got 2 really powerful and importantly free tools. One is a sustainability roadmap. That is an interactive survey / questionnaire, and it asks 4 or 5 questions against each of the 4 pillars to sort of see where you are in your sustainability journey. And it automatically generates a report that kind of tells you, you know, what you're doing, and I think it encourages businesses to see that they are doing something. So, excuse me. So that report is available on our website, on our homepage, and it's also on our resources page. So if you go to www.csr-accreditation.co.uk, you'll be able to see and take that interactive survey. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. It automatically generates a report, and it's a really nice litmus test. It's a really nice way of just, you know, gauging where you sit. And most organizations are surprised at how much they're doing that they weren't really aware of. And what they don't talk about as well. The second thing is something that I can provide you to help, maybe to make available. I mean, it is on our resources page, but it's an interactive get started sustainability toolkit. It's a PDF that's totally interactive. It provides all the lists against the 4 pillars, and it matrixes it. So it shows that kind of cross matrix with the 4 pillars, and it says, what are we doing now? And you can simply say, well, actually what we do now is we do have LED lights in, and we do have we've just put a charging point in for an electric car, and and then we have got a strategy for work placements, and we are doing something around gender pay equality, and yes, we do something with remember the local chamber, and we support local businesses, and we have a number of charities that we, so already that organization is just putting 4 or 5 things down, and they've got something against each of those 4 pillars. Then the next grid is, what are we doing that's aren't on the lists, because we can't come up with everything. So it helps people go, okay, well, we're doing all this other stuff that's not on this, and then what aren't we doing that we should be doing? And that's where we start to get into this realm of what will become mandatory around non-financial reporting, around net zero, and so on and so forth. And then you can amalgamate all of those things together, and it starts to give you a good idea of where you stand. Now the question is, how do we strategize and how do we prioritize? And that really is down to the independent requirements of the organization. And that get started toolkit also helps you aggregate the work that you're doing that can then be used towards a CSR accreditation. And the important thing about the accreditation is its independent recognition and validation from us, and our independent assessment panel. And it is baselining. So the first time is really just looking at where you are now. We're not going to wait for years, because we need you to baseline. We need you to audit, and then we can start to help you measure the impact going forward. And if it feels, even if it feels like you're not doing enough, if you're doing something, you're doing enough. So we want to hear about.
Okay, so it's progress, not perfection. So if somebody were to be doing absolutely zero, that's okay. Plot your strategies out, pick them, and you're moving forward in your journey.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, it's most organizations they just don't realize it, and they don't talk about it. And this becomes, it's a great way to create staff and external stakeholder engagement. It's a great way to bring people on the journey so that we're fulfilling our sense of purpose, and most importantly, collectively leading a legacy for future generations.
Absolutely. All for that. And in terms of help that you or your team, because I'm sure as people look at those tools, and we'll share them out within the community, I'm sure as people start using them, it will generate some questions. How are your teams set up to help people if they've got specific questions as they go through this kind of stuff?
Well, we have 4 key areas in our business. We have the accreditation, we have communication, which is the social impact reporting, we have education, which I'll talk about very quickly in a minute, and we have consultation. So we're happy to provide consultation, and we do go into organizations and help them put together their sustainability strategies and pull together the information required to move forward. The biggest blocks that we get from small businesses is we haven't got the capacity and we can't afford it. And what we tend to say is, well, you're doing it already. This is an investment, not a cost. So we're helping you maximize what you're doing, and you will see a commercial benefit from that. And in terms of capacity, we do provide a online self-paced learn as you go training course that's endorsed by Buxton University and the IAM. It also counts towards your continued professional development, and that creates enablement. So what we found is loads of organizations that put members of their staff on that training to create those CSR enablers. The training is no more than 2 or 3 hours. It's a 1-day face-to-face corporate course if we come to your organization, but if you do the online version without the interaction, it's about 2.5, 3 hours. It's certificated, and it creates enablement, and it has 6 modules. What is CSR, the benefits of CSR, the regulatory framework, the 4 pillars, how you build capacity and a team around CSR, and how you communicate impact around your initiatives. So it's a really great course to create the enablement within your organization that delivers the capacity and therefore the outputs.
Excellent. look, you're many steps ahead of most people on this call about this whole subject. Are there any common areas that you think people are less educated or even unaware of that an SME owner should be in this realm, Richard?
Well, I think the thing is, it comes back to that simplicity again. Unfortunately, we have that kind of almost every week. We have something that talks about, and then we feel we need to go and react to, and it gets confusing. And then suddenly there's this industry terminology. There's this whole range of, when I start SDGs, ESG, CSR, TCFD. There's suddenly all these acronyms that confuse people. There's the jargon. There's also the kind of the worry of greenwashing and box ticking. And I think that's the biggest problem is people. What do you Google when you go onto Google? We want our business to be more sustainable. So I think we talk about sustainability, I suppose, as a starting point, and within that, we then talk about environmental and social responsibility. What responsibilities do we have as a business? And this is about transition, and it's about mitigating risk, and it's about future planning. So a really good way to look at this, and from an educational point of view, is that a company's reports and accounts often are lagging indicators. They're what's been happening in the last year. When you put together an environmental and social responsibility strategy, they're leading indicators. So they're about planning your success going forward, because you're putting positive stuff in that's going to bring business in. It's going to bring people in. It's going to make you a more sustainable and profitable business.
I love that approach. We use something similar, but I hadn't thought of it from this perspective. So really good approach. So in terms of getting started, what's the top 3 actions that people might wish to take right now, Richard?
Well, from my point of view, I would look at our 4-pillar framework and look at the lists and identify what you are already doing. It's a really cathartic exercise to use that framework and actually be surprised at how much you are doing, because I think that makes companies and organizations feel good about themselves. At the moment, there's a lot of kind of finger pointing and people feeling, oh, we don't do enough, and and we feel really bad, and whereas we kind of want organizations. So I think number 1 is just have a look at what you're doing, and consolidate it, understand it. Number 2 is then work out how to make the most of it, how to communicate that, and how to build in future strategies. And then number 3 is how you engage people on that journey. The most important thing is not to leave people out. This cannot be the decision of the chief exec or the senior management or the C-suite within an organization. It's got to be from the newest recruit to the highest in the organization, and we need to ask our people, what do you want? So ask questions, ask your suppliers, what do you expect of our business? Ask your staff, what would you like to see? And your staff will surprise you, because as human beings, I think this is the most important thing really. As human beings, forget work, at home in front of the television, we see all this stuff. The blue planet, it might be. It's the Chris Packham thing on Earth. It's the it's the David Attenborough programming. It's the stuff on like Me Too and Black Lives Matter and the whole thing around gender pay equality. We are bombarded with this sense of environmental and social responsibility as human beings. So what can we do in our businesses that can address that, to make our businesses better and match our sense of purpose and value as human beings? Because the pandemic showed us that if we're sent home and told to do nothing, it's not great. And we like to have purpose in our lives and like to feel that we're doing the right thing going forward. So I think the thing is that we want to bring that into the workplace and get businesses to allow that sense of purpose within the workplace, within their staff. So if a member of staff wants to support a particular charity, or a member of staff wants to do something around single-use plastics, let's listen to them, build it into a strategy, and engage your people in building that brilliant and legacy that I've been talking about earlier.
I love that. I love that, the simplicity of a couple of points you've made there. One is asking staff, and 2 is asking suppliers. Very positive steps that you can take that show your intent around this whole area without actually dictating. So you've got the opportunity to find out what's important, and where you might want to drive and take advantage of the opportunities.
Agreed. We want to talk about it, and we want to feel that we're doing something about it as well. We want to be part of the solution. And often the problem with the COPs and the Davos and the, you know, these very lofty kind of like large meetings and groups, it's of national scientists and nation states and academics and, you know, the big corporates making all these decisions, and we feel that we're not part of that, and I think that's wrong. I think what we need to do is, you know, if this comes back down to this thing about social responsibility, about being about people, and if we can get, you know, tens of thousands of people to make little behavior changes and change, you know, and just do simple things like turning lights off and shutting doors, or, you know, reducing the use of single-use plastics, then we make big impacts. I mean, it's very, very simple. It's a mathematical equation. So the more and more people we can get and engage and encourage and inspire to do things, the better impacts we're going to make going forward. And businesses have the gift to do that within their organizations.
Excellent. I can see your passion coming out there, Richard. I can tell you're amazingly passionate about this. I've got one question, if that's okay. Just in terms of, because you talked about the four frameworks and working out what you do. And then the second was communicate it. Now, with sort of greenwashing on one end of the spectrum and saying nothing on the other end of the spectrum, what advice would you give people on, you know, kind of what and how they can communicate?
Well, the great thing about the accreditation process is it helps you put in evidence to support your claims. And we have a lovely saying within the organization that, you know, environmental and social responsibility is great narrative. It's brilliant for storytelling. It's dynamite for social media because you can tell things, but you've got to show the story doing. You have to back it up. So when you've done that baselining and you can see where you are on your journey, you know, you can communicate that to your you know, your staff and to your customers, but also you need to be able to back up where you can. And without baselining, you can't measure, so you can't put in the evidence to support the claims that you're making. So I think that's the important thing, is to look at how we provide the evidence, and as we move towards what may become a mandatory requirement for all organizations to do non-financial disclosure reporting, which is, in other words, reporting on your environmental and social responsibilities, and how you're delivering them. So putting in your KPIs and your metrics to show that you are making a difference. And that is critically important, because there's nothing worse than just saying stuff that can't be backed up, because you will be found out. We live in a digital age. Scrutiny's never been more so than it is now. People will find out. So you've got to make, but I do take a view that most people tell the truth, that most people are honest, most people want to do the right thing, and most people will try where they can to support the evidence that they're doing what they're doing. And that can be photographically, through testimonials, through reports and accounts, through financial data, whatever it might be. So yeah, when you're communicating, where you can support it with evidence to back it up, please do. Perfect.
Thank you very much. So yeah, real storytelling potential in this, you know, not just for the good of everyone. Yeah, because if you're telling your story about a CSR initiative, then you're also advising people of what they can do, aren't you? You're spreading the word in a way.
Yeah, and the thing is, going back to that complex sustainability landscape, you know, I encourage people to talk in layman's terms, talk in a language that we understand. Don't talk over our heads. And, you know, I mean, sometimes you have to use an acronym, or you have to use some tech language, but at the end of the day, you know, let's keep the conversation straightforward and simple. And let's be passionate about it as well. Let people show their passion about what they're doing within their organizations. Because as I say, it's, you know, we will make a difference. We can do that. And we see it already. We see incredible things that businesses are doing. And whether they're tiny little, you know, our accreditation is for sole traders as well as it is for multinationals. And, you know, we've you know, in any month we can accredit, you know, a small accountancy firm of 3 people. And in fact, this month we've just accredited, or we're just looking at a large global development company with tens of thousands of staff. So, and of course, that large company may look like it's doing a lot because it can throw a lot at it, but per staff, often the smaller businesses do more, and that's the thing to remember. And when you look at the SME environment within the UK, it's by a very long way the biggest employer. So if we can encourage smaller businesses to work together to do great things, then I think we'll make a difference.
Fantastic, Richard. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us this morning and give us some tips on how people can start. We'll be sharing those tools out with the community. Hopefully, get some people going, get some stories creating, get some motivation behind this, get it rolling, so to speak. So really, thank you so much. Just as a parting question, what book, or if somebody is really interested in this subject, what would you recommend? Is there any great books that you'd recommend on this whole subject for people?
Gosh, that's a brilliant question, James. And I don't know any. No, I can't answer that question with affirmity. I mean, there are loads of books and loads of things out there with people talking about it, but because it's such a big topic. So the thing is, if you drill down to those 4 pillars, you could get a book that's just about diversity and inclusion, a book that's just about how we move towards zero landfill and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's not anything that I know. I'm sure there are loads of great things out there that you can read, but there's nothing that I can pick off the top of my head and say, there's your Bible, go away and have a look at it.
Perhaps you haven't written it yet, Richard.
No, it's not written yet. No, but as I say, in terms of information, our website is super transparent and it's full of information that you can download and look at and use to inspire you to build a strategy for your organization.
Excellent. So there you go. Loads of information and tools on the website to inspire. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Thank you for joining Munch&Learn.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.